And it seems as if we're constantly distracted by things in our environment, and we can't just lock in and focus. People have turned to a tool called minimalism to try and impact these trends and live a much happier life. I found that there's a problem that we haven't yet solved in our approach to these trends. And that is why we can rid ourselves of life's excesses physically and take things out of our life. We haven't been able to remove life's excess mentally that causes a lot of drama in our mind. None of us actually wake up and want to be overwhelmed mentally. None of us really want self-doubt and fear and negativity to creep into the equation. We don't jump out of bed and say, okay, brain, please give us a bunch of stress and overthinking and all of these things that are causing us to be distracted. These thoughts just come and go and seem to fill our mind with excess and clutter and what I just call drama. And so after years of trying to stop these thoughts from coming or to remove them, I realized that you can't. They're going to come and go as they please. And so the question becomes, what can we do then to remove some of these thoughts that lead to these trends and cause a lot of excess waste in our thinking and really seem to frustrate us and keep us longing for more? I've realized now that here is where these trends and minimalism collide, and it's time for us to really evolve our understanding of minimalism to start upping our skill set in what I call mental minimalism. And what's the payoff of doing this? As we follow these good mental processes, we start to clear up all of this extra waste and excess and overthinking and fear in our minds, and we start to be able to live a more happy and fulfilled life. And so what we're going to get into is my top 3 tools that I follow on a daily basis to really live out what I'm calling mental minimalism. So let's jump right in. So the first tool I want to get into is called Edit Your Story, and where this tool is most valuable is whenever you're feeling stressed, frustrated, anxious, or just a bit overwhelmed. It's usually an indication that you're not thinking minimally in that moment. And so the truth behind this tool is that our stress or frustration in life is never caused from our reality or events that happen to us. It's always the stories we make up and believe about reality. And what you do with the Edit Your Story tool is whenever you're feeling all of this overwhelm, I want you to pause and really write down everything that you're thinking in that moment. Why are you overwhelmed? Who is frustrating you? Why are you upset? What is it that is going to play out bad? Anything that comes to mind, I want you to write it down on a piece of paper and get all of your thoughts captured. And so to show you guys an example, I'm going to go back to something that happened early on in my career that got me really, really frustrated. And it was when a boss used to call a lot to check on my projects. And so what I did in this moment to help me get more minimal in my thinking is I wrote down everything I remember I was thinking in that moment. And so I started with my boss calls to check on a project, and then I went into all of my thinking that was causing me stress. I started to think things like, this boss is a micromanager that treats me like a dang child here. They are always breathing down my neck. They're trying to get me fired. They're trying to set me up. It was all of these things that I remember thinking in the moment that happened like this. And so what I did with the story was just wrote it all down so I could see what I was thinking in my mind. Then the power of the Edit Your Story tool is you don't filter this, you just write everything you're thinking, no matter how bad it sounds. And then once you have it all written down, you can't think of anything else, you go back through. And what you have to do is edit that story. You have to cross out anything that you can't know to be true, that is about someone's motive, that is about someone's intentions, that's judgment. Anything that's not basically a scientific fact, you got to cross it out. You have to ask, what do I know for sure? And here's what I was left with. I was left with my boss called to check on a project. It was that I was behind on the project. It was also that I had to present to the board on Thursday. And it was that the boss calls often to check on my projects. And so I went from a full page of stress in my mind to on paper, I had 4 sentences of what was really going on. And actually, if you look at what's really going on, none of it was stressful. None of it was painful. None of it should cause me anxiety. And then from there, after I went through what do I know for sure, and I was looking at it, it was really easy about what's the next thing I could do to add value or help in this situation. It was I could redirect my priorities and focus on getting this project caught up, and so I could present to the board. it became really clear about what decision I should make moving forward, and all of a sudden life was good. Mental minimalism tool number 2 is called the this means that tool. Now, if you're someone that oftentimes things happen to you and you quickly jump into what the future might bring and how it's going to turn out poorly, this is an indication that you're not being minimal in your thinking, because the same type of thing happens where simple events happen to us, and then based on what story we jump into and really start thinking about and believing, that's where the stress comes from and gets us really cloudy in our thinking. And so this tool is super powerful, because if you find yourself jumping to conclusions, what I want you to do is, again, get on paper and just write down in one column, we call it this, and think about the simple events that happen to you every single day that then cause you stress. A common example I use to help people understand this tool is in the this column. Let's say a coworker or someone walks by you and doesn't say hello. Now, that inherently isn't stressful. That shouldn't cause any extra thinking in our mind. That happens all the time, that people walk by us and don't say hello. But if you really notice where your mind goes, if someone you know walks by you and doesn't say hello, go into the next column and say, this means that. And write down everything that your mind knows that that means, which is that person's rude, that person's stuck up, that person doesn't like me, they think they're all that in a bag of chips since they got promoted, they think they're the best around here, they don't have to talk to the little people anymore. The moment I went from the this column and jumped into the means that column, and if I believe anything that I am thinking there, I am going to start to feel really overwhelmed, really stressed. I'm going to think people don't like me in my area. I get really, really cluttered. And so how do we get back to mental minimalism? We separate out these two columns and notice where our mind jumps, and we look at, is any of that absolutely true? And what you'll find is when I do this as my own practice, this means that column is oftentimes none of it is true. And if I don't question it and put it on paper, it stays here and I feel really distracted.